Wait for the hangout to come up and we'll do a quick sound check.
Okie dokie. I did lower my output level a little bit. I don't know if it affects you that much, but I was peaking, so I figured I'd back up a little bit.
It never distorted on my end. I never heard any.
Okay. Maybe just peaking on my end then. Because I was distorting out. I was just kind of doing some radio voice things, and it was like, I saw a little line go up and then go flat.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a problem.
Still waiting. There we go. YouTube is now caught up and I can hear it.
Okay.
Okay, that works. Sounds like me. Sounds like you. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah, if it sounded like Jane Fonda, then we might have a problem.
If I looked like Jane Fonda, now that would be even worse. Yeah. With a goatee.
We'd probably scare people away. Let's see. I need to turn off that.
All right, let's do this thing.
Sure.
Record, and go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Linux, episode 191, all about Chris, recorded May 3rd, 2015, and brought to you by Element OP Productions, elementop.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Linux show that's not about Linux, but about life in the context of Linux. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel, and as Seth is on his vacation, joining us this week is the great Chris the Gooey Kid Anderson. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm Chris the Gooey Kid Anderson.
Oh, wait. Wow. Chris, you know your name. Chris the Command Line Godfather Neve. See, my brain just went, I had a stroke right here on the air. I didn't even notice that. Amazing. Hi, Chris, Command Line Godfather Neves.
That was probably that
was weird.
I was impressed. I was like, wow. So I'm now Seth and me.
Well, yeah, that's right. You're doing double duty tonight. That's what happens when I don't have a script to read. Things just go nuts.
I'm doing fine, Mark. I'm having fun with my fountain pens. I haven't graduated back up to my my calligraphy pens yet, but man, I can't believe how cheap these little cartridges are for ink for my fountain pens. I mean, I got like 20 of them for $2, so
okay.
I don't know if I'll go back to a regular pen.
I just yesterday, right now, I'm wearing, hold it up here for people to see it, a steel watch band for the first time since I wore my grandfather's watches when I was a kid. You know, I've always had, I rocked the Timex Ironman forever.
Right.
And then I got this Moto 360. It came with a leather band because the steel band wasn't out yet when I bought it. And I'm sure it's by design. They've engineered this where that most bands don't fit it. There's a very narrow opening where it fits in there, and most bands tend to be thicker and don't go in there. So a company called Steel Connect, it was a Kickstarter project, made this little adapter. I'm not going to be able to show it very well on the screen, but it's an adapter that goes into the watch and then makes it where any standard watch band will work. And the adapter looks pretty cool. So the company,
I would have never guessed.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't have said that was an adapter, I would have never guessed it. It looks like it's part of the watch.
Yeah. So Steel Connect, the company, is based out of the UK, but they do their manufacturing out of Malaysia. So this was shipped to me out of Malaysia. It took literally a month to get here. But be it. And it's a little expensive for a couple of pieces of metal. It's $38, I think it was, for the adapters. But now I can put just any regular watch band on. So this is a relatively inexpensive band. And I think it looks nice. It elevates the watch to a professional. But I say all that to say that for the first time ever, I sat down on my laptop and started typing, and the steel band was scraping on the laptop. I've never had that experience because I've always had soft, pliable bands on every watch I've ever worn. And so now, after all that, a month of waiting and all that, I'm actually thinking I may not be able to wear this because I type all the time. And first, I can see it's going to scratch up my laptop really badly, and second, it's not comfortable. Maybe I'll be able to get used to it, but it just seems like unintended consequences.
I ran into the same problem when I started wearing my activity band, because I gave up wearing watches for a long time ago, just because of the fact that I'd be bounding off the keyboard all the time and making all that racket. So I quit wearing watches because once I started in my profession. But I put that band on, and it's got a standard watch clasp. And I'm sure people that are watching or listening don't care, but it's a standard watch clasp, and it makes a lot of racket if you're not paying attention to how you're typing.
Yeah. So I just at this moment, I had this discovery, and I was all excited. I waited a month. I put it on yesterday for the first time. I was like, oh, this looks nice. It's professional. It really makes it look like, the addition of a $40 band makes it look like a much more expensive watch. But I'm going to have to take my watch off to type. And since I type like 70% of my days, there may be a problem there.
Just a little bit. Possibly a problem with you and your laptop.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to get one of those razors to lift your keyboard up at a funny angle, so that way you're not hitting the keyboard.
Yeah, well, we'll see at the desk. With a real keyboard, it might not be a problem, but on a laptop, you've got that space there where the trackpad is, and there's 3 or 4 inches, and that's where your wrists rest, and so that's what I'm hitting. And it's going to scratch it up, and it's making noise, and it's uncomfortable because there's this pressure. So I'll get used to it. First world problems. Wah, my $400 watch is not comfortable. Wah.
$400 watch, man. It's still too expensive.
It's actually not. It was I think $250, and then
it's still too expensive.
The adapters makes it $300, and the band was another $40, so $350.
Yeah, my Polar Loop was $80, so.
Yeah, and like I said when I bought it, prior to that, my $50 Ironman watch had lasted me a decade. So
you just had to replace the battery,
right? Like once in that time, because the batteries last 5 years.
Yep.
The batteries last 15 to 20 hours. So anyway,
but you can recharge it.
Yeah. And the Apple Watch was running about $100 more than this, and people were referring to that as, the rich person's watch. Maybe there's some sort of psychological thing there. When you get over 300 for a watch, people just balk at it. And I'm sure Apple didn't choose that arbitrarily. I'm sure you've seen the teardown articles where it says that it cost them about $87 to make a watch. And I've seen several articles trying to make some hay out of that. It's like, this only costs $87, and they're selling it for anywhere between $350 and $10,000. And I mean, wouldn't you? If you could sell for $350, would it cost you $90 to make? Wouldn't you?
Of course.
It's called business.
It's capitalism. Until someone comes up with something better. Come on, Android. We need something better.
I would, again, I haven't used the iWatch, and I know it's nascent, right? They're still not there, but I would posit that at this point, the Moto 360 is a better device.
Mm-hmm. Well, but they're all first gens. So in 2 years, it'll be a whole different story.
Yeah. Point taken. They're early, but they're not first gens. Smartwatches have been around even pre-Pebble. But if you wanted to go into the modern smartwatch, the Pebble would be considered first gen. So these are at least second, maybe third. I mean, technically, you could go all the way back to the calculator watch I had as a fifth grader.
Right. So if you want to go that way, I will bow to that. But I still think these are the type of watch that they are. Yeah. I would say they are first gen watches.
Yeah. They're early, definitely. I accept that. But I'm just not sure. People keep saying first gen. It's the first gen watch that Motorola's made, or the first gen watch that Apple's made. So okay. And the new, anyway, I don't want to turn this into Smartwatch Central. But one of the things that amazed me is you can swap out watch faces. That's one of the big things. Apple only lets you have theirs, and there's like 10 or 12, and on Android there's literally hundreds of thousands of them. And I subscribe to a couple of groups on Google Plus communities of watch bands, and I'm amazed at how many people take a fully digital interface with several hundred pixels per inch um, density, where you can have pretty much any image they want, and they make an analog watch face on it. I don't understand. What if you want an analog watch? You can get one a lot cheaper. It just
Or more expensive.
It's like 80%. That's my number. But my impression is that 80% of the watch faces I see are ripoffs of Tag Heuer or Rolex or Citizen analog watch face. I don't like, and I don't want to do math when I look at my watch. I want to see numbers 2:32, and I know it's 2:32. I don't want to look at it and go, well, this hand is sort of off of the 6, and so it's maybe about 2:32, 2:33. No, I don't want that. Why would you pay for a computer on your wrist and put an imprecise analog dial on it? I don't get it. But apparently I'm the only one that doesn't get it, because it's the most common thing.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. If you're going to have a digital watch, you might as well have a digital face.
Right. I mean, the iWatch, the Mickey one is the one they show in their commercials. And again, it's hands. Right? I don't want hands on a digital, on a smartwatch. That's just dumb.
It's silly. But yeah, people, it's the norm. Everyone is used to seeing a clock face on your wrist. So they're going to put the norm for everyone to see.
And I've seen lots of recreations of, I even have one on my watch, a recreation of a Casio digital watch. And it's nice for nostalgia, but why would I want that? The whole point of buying this was to step out of, why would I want to reproduce the Timex Ironman that I had for so many years when I could still have that one? It's still upstairs. I can go put it on if I want that. I just don't understand.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't wear a watch, so I couldn't tell you.
So many things in life I don't understand. Just add that to volume 357.
Yeah. No, I think I'm right behind you, around 250 some, right after women.
So as we have said before, that since Seth isn't here and we knew he wasn't going to be here, it occurred to me that we've done 191 shows with these guys. Well, Seth came in after, but so with Chris has been here from the beginning, and we've never actually talked about Chris. We, things have leaked out during this section of the show that we call the warm-up section. So this show is an interview about Chris, and we're going to find out interesting stuff about him, including the fact that he's dumping Linux on his laptop. What?
There's a chance. With the new, for those that don't know, I changed my job after 10 years of being in education. I'm now in a larger corporation, and I don't do the same job I used to. So I've been toying with the idea of, in my free time, to do other things that don't need such horsepower on my laptop. Because I don't need to virtualize anything on my laptop unless I'm testing something for you guys. So I thought, well, maybe my old laptop, which if you look in the YouTube, you can see it behind me running LXDM or something. I don't remember what it's currently at, but I don't need that big of a machine anymore. And matter of fact, I want something lighter, a little more portable. And when I want to fire it up, I don't want to have to deal with anything. So I've been toying around with the idea of possibly going with the Chromebook Pixel. It just kind of makes sense with everything in my life being in Google, except for my new job stuff. Why not give it a shot? The only thing that's holding me back is they're expensive.
Yeah,
they're expensive machines. They're a grand and higher. So it's taking a little bit for me to pull the trigger, because I don't want to spend $1,000. I'd like to at least play games on it or something.
Right. And my understanding of that device is that it is a premium device, the hardware is worthy of the price tag. Yep. But again, you've spent that kind of money on something that is so limited. But as I've said many times before, most of what people do is in the cloud. Mm-hmm. You're in fact interfacing with Google Docs and Facebook and the web in general. And yeah, so I get it. I see why it's a thing, but if you're giving up functionality, shouldn't you reap the reward of price?
Right. That's why I'm torn, because if you look at some of the other Chromebooks, the price tag is so much lower.
Right.
But if you look at the reviews, when they compare apples to apples, the reviews are pretty bad. So I'm one of those type of people that I'm going to buy the best device that I can possibly get for the money that I'm willing to spend. And I usually put a laptop at $1,000 because I want it to last the 4 to 6 years and not, burn up or fall apart, or because I've bought the $400 laptop and I'm just too hard on them.
Yeah,
They end up,
you can either buy four $400 laptops or one
Exactly.
$1,500 laptop. You spend the same amount of money over 5 or 6 years,
Yep.
but you don't have the pain of moving in 5 times.
Exactly. So I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know which way to go, and my gut says that I will miss the virtualizing part of it. But if I miss it that much, I can always go to Amazon and virtualize it in Amazon's S3 systems. So am I really losing anything?
But again, you're paying a premium for that.
All right, but there's other virtualized hosts on the internet that you could go with too. Amazon was just the first one.
Right.
So, I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided one way or the other. I don't know. Talk me off the ledge, people. Tell me I'm totally wrong and I should stay with my gaming grade Linux machines.
And my advice would be check the return policy. If you can bang on it for 30 days or even better yet 90 days, you should just go ahead and do it. I mean, if you got the grand. But otherwise, I would really be concerned about getting stuck with an expensive boat anchor, because if you've got it off to the side running a chat window and you're doing your real work on your old laptop, you haven't gained anything.
Exactly. That's and I'm afraid of that. So that's why I haven't just pulled the trigger yet and wrote the big check. So I'm torn, and it's a giant, horrible, horrible torn thing. The other thing that I'm going to miss is there's not much. I don't think there's any devices you can plug into them. I think they're pretty stock with just the USB Type-C connector now. I think you get one on each side, and that's about all that's there.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so no USB keyboards, no Bluetooth. I don't even know if there's Bluetooth on it.
I'm pretty sure there's Bluetooth. But again, it could be just because I made that up right now.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting thought when you look at it, because if I'm doing anything, like through my phone, it's all in Google's cloud and none of it's local. And the stuff I've been playing with the idea of, maybe writing a story, or I've got all these things that I want to talk about later,
right?
that are running around in my head, and I'd like to get them out of my head, and so I can actually work with them.
Right.
I don't know.
I wanted to say
is not
that
the universal interface.
Yes, the phone is still not. I wanted to say that I took my wife yesterday and we went to see the Avengers, Age of Ultron opening weekend. Now, I have to preface this by saying that the first Avengers movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, on my top 10 list. I watch it once a month at least, because I think it's
that high, but
well, it's just, for me, it checks all the boxes. It's really, I mean, the cinematography is outstanding, the music is good, the sound editing is some of the best ever. The story is really immersive, and you get this plot development as they reveal things, and plus there's balls out action, and so it's got all of that, and that's why I like it so much. Age of Ultron is 40 to 45 minutes of story stretched across a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, but there's so much action I didn't care. So as a movie, it's like a 6 out of 10. As a fun adventure, it's 8.5 to 9 out of 10. So literally the first frame of the movie starts in an action scene, and that sets the tone. And it's way more epic battles. I mean, in the it's kind of formulaic now, the action scene. You've got your introductory fast sort of thing, then a major battle scene in Act 1, then some story elements, then a major battle scene in Act 2, then the final story elements culminating in a final battle scene. And that's every action movie. I just described every action movie made since 2005.
And every book since 2002.
Right. Yeah. and at some point in every movie, you're going to hear, wow, chunk, chunk. That's the universal music track to every action movie. I don't know why. But so Age of Ultron has the 3 classic battle scenes, but there's like 16 more smaller battle scenes mixed into it. James Spader as Ultron is really good. It's just his voice, right? So he could throw himself into it, and it's creepy and dark, and it just makes you shiver at some points just how disturbed he is. I haven't seen it, but I hear people love his performance on Blacklist, and it's like, take that twisted character and put him inside a giant 7-foot destructive robot, and it makes for some creepiness.
I would definitely agree with the creepiness.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet. I was supposed to see it last night, or Friday night, but we ended up staying in Glendive, so we didn't get to go to the opening day at the Super D or whatever it is at the big thing in Billings. But I was a little sad that I didn't get to go to see it with my brother, because we've gone to pretty much every other action movie or Marvel movie in the last couple of years together. So
I was super excited that I found a theater that was showing it in IMAX, not 3D. I don't like 3D, particularly rotoscope 3D, which is done after the fact. They shoot the film in the 2D, and then they come back in digitally, and that is the worst example of trickery ever, and I hate it. And almost all the Marvel movies have been done like that. So I was really excited that this thing just said IMAX. It was great, and I paid the IMAX premium. It was $17 a ticket, something like that. It was ridiculous. And I walk in the door and hand the guy my ticket, and he hands me a pair of 3D glasses. I was, oh crap, really? I was actually mad that I got 3D. So I had to sit through the movie in 3D. I got a headache. It's not the worst 3D. It's not Captain America 3D. The first Captain America movie I hold up as one of the worst examples of rotoscope 3D ever. It's just terrible. No, things in real space don't look like that. And I just thought it was ridiculous, and it ruined the movie for me. In fact, I consider that one of the worst Marvel movies ever because I saw it in 3D, and it ruined it for me. Again, that's just me being an old man. Get off my lawn. But you have this beautiful digital 4K IMAX screen that's capable of rendering better than life images, really crisp, high definition. And then you do the rotoscoping 3D trick, and everything is now jittery because every frame of film jitters in a 3D environment just because of the way they're doing it. They're tricking your eyes into doing it. And so you've totally ruined this pristine, crystal clear experience for me. So I was bitter about that, but I do have to say that, overall it was a good movie. One of my complaints, and I thought Joss Whedon did such a good job in the first one, in every action scene, you never get confused, right? When you see the Hulk and Thor on the flying thing, and they're fighting and they're punching, and Hulk slams the thing in and Thor hammers it, you know who's doing what at every piece of it, even if you only see them for a couple of seconds. That was not the case in this one. Of course, they expanded the universe, so they had all the characters that they brought in almost so far. So you had a War Machine and Tony Stark, Iron Man, and you had the Hulk, and you had I can't remember the guy's name who flies from Captain America, Winter Soldier. But you had
Falcon.
Okay, so you had everybody fighting at and Maria Hill and guy with the eye patch, Nick Fury. So everybody's in at some point in some of these massive epic battle scenes. So I understand that it's part of it is just the way they've written it, but also you're seeing like a half a second here and a half a second there, and you just get confused. Who just hit what? I'm not sure. Well, there was a fist that went into her face there. Was that a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. Was that Quicksilver flashing through there, or was that Captain America's shield? I couldn't quite tell. It was so fast, and they were both kind of blue and red. So, yeah. So it's got flaws, but overall, still very enjoyable.
Cool. I will definitely look forward to going to it when it comes to my little town.
So I'm interested to hear what the audience has to say about my review. It wasn't glowing. Right. And if you say anything isn't perfect in the Marvel universe, you're going to hear about it. But, watch it, give me an honest review of it, and tell me what you think.
See, I'll have to watch it twice then, because the first time I go in completely blind, deaf, and stupid, because I want to just the experience it. I don't want to
Right.
put any of the fanboyism in it. And then the second or third time I watch it, that's when I start tearing things apart. So
I can't distinguish both of those things. I'm watching everything. Again, I've mentioned it so many times. I am a film buff. The art of filmmaking is something I'm interested in. So I can't distance myself. And sometimes, like when you're watching G.I. Joe: Rise of Cobra, I can turn the logic centers of my brain off and enjoy that film because there was no logic in it. So, but the thing about Age of Ultron is there are times where they force you to re-engage the logic centers because there's this really important plot point. You go, oh wait, I got to pay attention to this, and then they introduce something that's completely illogical. And so it's kind of a 1-2 punch.
yeah,
But that I will say this: the scene that you've seen in the trailers where they're all trying to pick up Thor's hammer, you've seen that one, right?
yeah.
They're all in, and they try Warhammer and War Machine and Iron Man are both using their rocket gloves, and nobody can do it. And Cap touches it, and it wiggles a little, and that whole bit. That's funny, but later on, it becomes a major plot point, and I totally wasn't expecting that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, minor spoiler there.
I wouldn't call it a spoiler. I'd say it's a
It's a
pay
teaser.
attention. It's a pay attention spot.
Yeah. Because there's a moment at the moment where that happens. I'm seeing it with 600 other people in this giant IMAX theater. There was an audible gasp from the room. We all went. It was one of those cool moments.
That should be a good point then.
So pay attention.
I will have to pay attention.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I got. Let's move on to our listener feedback. Dalton writes in with a couple of different things. He asked the question, does a single laptop user need a Boris box? I think we've addressed this issue before. Need? I don't know. Do you want to play with one? I don't think anybody really needs a Boris box. There's good off-the-shelf routers you can buy. I would say anybody who needs to do a single user could probably get by with just the dumbest thing shrink wrapped on the shelf at the electronics store. Because you're not going to be interested in packet sniffing. You're not going to traffic shaping. You're not going to be interested in any of that sort of stuff. You just want something to keep the bad guys on one side and the good guys on the other. And so they're fine. But if you get more than, like I've commented in this house before, there's over a dozen internet connected devices in my home, and 5 different people trying to use them. I need something with some more advanced stuff. It doesn't have to be a Boris box. In fact, mine isn't. It's an off-the-shelf one, but it's one of the more expensive off-the-shelf ones. So one single laptop user, you probably don't need it, but if you want to play with it, it's there and it doesn't cost much.
I would go with that to a certain extent. It depends on what your usage is. I mean, if you're a user, I know a couple of single guys that have, 12 different devices in their house, all using the same internet at the same time. So it depends on what type of user you are. If you are a single laptop and that is it, no smart TV, you're not using internet on your phone, and you're not torrenting, and you're just consuming it on one device at one time, then you probably don't need a Boris box. But if you're using 5 or 6 devices at the same time, you're streaming in one room and you're downloading another and blah, 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 that I would get one just for the simple fact of being able to move the packets a little bit quicker with a Boris box.
Yeah. That's something a lot of people don't think about is you may not be using the internet, but there are things in your house that are. If you've got, like Chris said, a smart TV, a Roku, a media center, if you've got any of that stuff, even if you don't think of yourself as using the internet, there's probably stuff in your house that is.
Yep. Or even some of the newer security systems use the internet.
Right.
When you're, their traffic is marked low end, so it's not, your QoS doesn't kill everything else for it. But yeah, I would say look at your usage and go from there.
All right, to continue on with his email, he says, I tried Korora, and it worked great at first on my laptop. I was even able to play my favorite online game, RuneScape, but then I upgraded it, and it couldn't find my internet connection. So that's a case of upgrading breaking stuff. It does happen.
Yeah, I would say that sounds like a kernel and Wi-Fi driver.
You had that problem,
So,
right? Right. You updated, but it wasn't with Core, or it was with Manjaro, right?
yeah, it was with Manjaro where I lost. And what ended up happening, I had it actually. It wasn't even that hard of a fix for that particular instance. I had to um, plug in on the hard line and do another update because another package was awaiting me that had the fix already. So it might just be that you need to update again. So if you can plug it into a hard line, you might get lucky.
Yeah. And then he ends this letter saying, "Keep up the good work." So thanks, Dalton. We appreciate that. Rick writes in to say that I'm like a broken watch. I'm right twice a day. Mark your calendars, because I'm going to say that Mark is right, not once, but twice. First of all, Daredevil is a must-see, and Vincent D'Onofrio has been outstanding as the Kingpin. He really gives a sense of that barely restrained strength and rage that makes him really creepy. So, Chris, I have to ask you, have you watched any Daredevil?
No, I haven't. I've been actually not even watching anything on the TV. I've been too busy with kids and softball and everything else.
We cannot do a podcast next week if you haven't seen at least the first episode. I refuse to speak to you again until you see at least the first episode of Daredevil.
Okay, I will try. It'd be better if I could cache it, if I could, temporarily store it on my tablet so I don't have to deal with the Wi-Fi at my at the hotel that I'll be staying at this week. So yeah.
There is that, and of course that's exactly what Netflix doesn't want you to do. All right, and then
even if I could cache it in the app, if it'd be something where I could say, Netflix, I want to watch this, but I can't watch it at the place I'm going because there's crap. Let me cache it in the app. I'd be okay with it.
All right, now I'm continuing on with Rick's email. He says, secondly, regarding charging for mods. Like Mark, I'm an old school capitalist, and I think if you want to charge for something you create, you should be able to. Then it's up to the creator to convince people that it's worth paying for. If it is, why should the fact that it was created by modding an existing game be a factor? Now, this may lead to game creators requiring modders to pay a licensing fee if they extend the game, but that too will be subject to market forces. Thanks for your great work on the show.
See? I think that's a universal statement there for charging for mods.
Yeah. Well, our next listener, who didn't say his name, left a voicemail, and he disagrees with that statement. So we'll play that and see what the anonymous listener has to say.
Hey guys, I'll try to make this quick, but I've got a couple things I wanted to say. The first topic is Ready Player One. Chris, we've heard your opinion on it. Mark, I'd like to ask you yours. My own personal opinion is that it was only half okay. I felt the 80s trivia was a little over the top, and I really felt that, I felt about the same that most people do about the only 90s kids will remember the shenanigans. Other than that, I did feel it was a good book. I just didn't feel it was worth the attention or hype that it got. That's all on that topic. The second is the doozy, Steam and mods. I was personally against paid mods for several reasons. The first being that when buying mods on Steam, the modders only got 25% of the profit. Steam took 25%, the developers took the rest, at least for the Skyrim mods. Not only that, somebody could already donate to Nexus mods, to which the modder would get 100% of that donation. Now, Gabe Newell said that there should have been a slider that could be set to 0. So if you didn't want to pay for a mod, you didn't have to. But what if you set it to 0? Find out that the mod you got was a good mod and want to give the modder money. You either have to find it on Nexus Mods, which you probably can't because the modder took it off, or delete the mod on Steam, go and rebuy the mod, to which the modder would only get, you said, 25%. There are more reasons to be against paid mods, but I only really had time to bring these two reasons up. Really, I was hoping that you guys were going to be against paid mods because you're Linux guys. I mean, I felt that mods were a lot like the GNU/open source community. That's not to say I'm against making money. I'm not Richard Stallman, but the base distribution should be free, at least in my opinion. That's really all I had to say, so there's only one thing left to say. Stay classy, San Diego.
right, so let's take those in reverse order, and let's talk about first the modding, and then I'll give my review of Ready Player One.
Sure.
So he referred to an anonymous, we'll call him Ron, since he signed off with Ron Burgundy's sign off. Ron said that he didn't like the fact that in the Skyrim in particular, the modder got 25%, Steam got 25%, and the developers got 50%. Personally, I'm fine with that. The modder wouldn't be able to do his modding if the developers hadn't done their developing and Steam hadn't done their distributing. So, if that's the split they set up, fine. You either make the mod or you don't. You take the money or you don't. That doesn't bother me in the least. And there's also, I don't see any reason why the developer, the modder, couldn't put a PayPal website up and say, hey, if you want to give me more money, do that. Outside that, maybe there's something in the licensing agreement for modding that says you can't do that, but I would doubt it. That's my thought on that. Chris, what do you think there?
The thing that I would go with is I've had some really bad mods that actually broke my machine. So I would hope, well, I don't really know in this case, but I would hope that these mods are at least being tested before they're being released over Steam to make sure they're not damaging to your computer or the game itself. So because Steam has to do some sort of vetting of these mods, they need at least a little portion of whatever they're charging to make up for storage, distribution, and all that stuff. Now the developer's getting 50%. That's harder to take. I missed that when I was reading the article about the developers taking 50%. I think that's a little excessive, and I think that developers shouldn't take that much. They should take a portion, but I think the modder should get the 50%, and then Steam gets 25 for distribution and such, and then the developer of the original game gets the 25. I think that it would also help if Steam would take a lesson from, say, someone like the Humble Indie Bundle guys, where they have sliders, so you can say, well, I want to give so much to these guys and so much to those guys. That would probably eliminate all of the issues when it comes to paying for mods, because you can also say, this mod is suggested retailed at $25, but the minimum you can get away with is $5 or something like that.
Okay, well, I think 50% is fine, frankly, because again, you're modding on something that whoever the Skyrim people are, I don't know who developed that game, spent years and millions making. So
right.
if they want to take 50% of it, that doesn't bother me in the least.
Well, that's why I'm thinking they should get. I mean, I don't say they don't get anything, but I think the modder who spent however much time building that particular mod should get the lion's share of the money, is my opinion.
Well, okay, and I accept that, but my point is that he spent his time rearranging content that somebody else had already made. Mm-hmm. He's not generating new content.
Well, no, sometimes those mods can be generating new content. You can import, the wireframing may be already there.
Okay, so he's importing assets and textures. All right, I get that.
Yeah.
But on an engine somebody else made. So what I'm saying is the 50% doesn't bother me. I can see your point that it does bother you. But again, if you know those rules going in and you still decide to make the mod, then you've decided to play by those rules. I did want to touch on the things, you decide not to pay for something. How do you pay for it later? The way I've done that in the past, very simply, if something is offered, if there's a no pay option and I take something and I like it, and what I'll often do is go back and buy something else that I don't necessarily want because now I'm contributing to that author's work. I understand that he's done something good. I'm not saying that's what everybody should do, because now you're stuck with two things and only one you want, but that's the way I do it in particular is if I choose to not pay for one thing, like say an Android app or whatever, there's a free version. Instead of going back and maybe upgrading, I'll just buy a different app by that same developer.
Okay. I would go along the lines of if it doesn't ruin your game save, what's the problem of deleting the mod and going back in and rebuying it? As long as it doesn't hurt your game save, why not?
Yeah. Ron here is saying that he's willing to give him money, but not time. You know, he was not willing to spend the time to delete and reinstall. That seems a little backwards.
Everyone has their line, and people stand on it. So, but as far as going back to the idea of free software that he put up there, that I've been long standing in our environment or our community saying that if you like something, you should pay for it, because otherwise it may not be there ever again.
Yes. Paying for things is important. People got to eat. Now, going back to your first question, what did I think of Ready Player One? I can tell by your voice that you're younger than I am, and so I can see why you didn't get the 80s stuff and why you'd think it was overdone. But for a 40-something, 45 years old guy, that book was a trip through my childhood. And all of the random stuff that they talked about, there was almost nothing in that game that I couldn't directly relate to. Like, for example, I never personally played Zork, but only because I didn't have a computer that would play it back in the day. But I knew guys who did, and so I understood Zork, and I got that reference. So yes, I can see why somebody who was born in the post year 2000 would think that it's overblown and not worth it. And I would say for you, it's probably not worth a read for you. And for somebody who's younger, who's older rather, and who was already 50 years old in the 80s, well, they're probably close to dead now. But anyway, it's maybe not for you. That book was written by a Gen Xer for Gen Xers. And no, it wasn't overdone. It was perfect. In fact, I could have done with more. I loved the book. I laughed out loud. I rarely laugh out loud when reading books, but I laughed out loud a number of times. One of my nightly rituals is as I'm brushing my teeth and doing my nightly routine, I have my audiobook playing. So I routinely have my phone up next to my ear while I'm brushing my teeth as I'm doing. And so one night I had the phone on the nightstand playing as my wife was, doing her thing, and she walked in, and like 3 different times, she had no context of the book, didn't understand what was going on, but there were like 3 different times in that one night where she laughed out loud too, because you have to be of that age. Love the book. Wouldn't read a sequel, I don't think, because I don't know where you could go with that. But yeah, it wasn't too much if you're of the right age.
Yeah. I still think it's funny. And my son read it just recently because he needed a book, and I'm like, here, read this. And he's reliving the 80s I'm reliving the 80s and forcing him through some of it because it's just good knowledge for him to have, like role-playing D&D.
Right.
Most of the kids don't play D&D anymore, so my son actually loves it and is wanting to host his own game, but not in the newest system that Dungeons and Dragons are running, but the old one that what was that, the Tale of the Crypt, or I can't remember it off the top of my head, but where he found the first thing, that I have that mod, that story plot in my trunk of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And after he read the book, he was looking through the books to write a character, and he went, "Oh my God!"
You have it. Yeah.
He had a small cardiac arrest or something in my room next to the D&D thing. So it was interesting to see the reaction of somebody who's being shown some of these older things. Like, I actually downloaded Zork and told him to try and play it.
That's awesome.
Because he was curious. He didn't know what it was. And I'm like, all right, well, here you go. Yeah. And he played it for 30 minutes and went, no, I can't do this, Dad. So it's interesting to look at, to be, I'm at the last end of the Gen X people. So some of the things I was too young for, but a lot of it I caught. And it was fun to see my son relive some of those events as a,
right,
as a 14-year-old. So
he writes about at one point that it's a perfect reenactment or recreation of the Family Ties living room. And I knew immediately what that looked like. I was able to draw that picture in my head because I had seen dozens of episodes take place in that living room. And when he's, there are other things when he's describing, the movie War Games. In fact, I went and put that in my Netflix queue because I wanted to see it again. I I remembered loving it, and he made me want to watch it again. So yeah, you just got to be of the right age.
Or have someone usher you through
Right.
remembering that age. Yeah, if you're just a raw user or a raw person who's never lived through it, and doesn't have any idea about what that time period was like, the book isn't for you. The book is for people of that time period.
I just quickly, I want to comment. I'm reading right now Kevin Mitnick's autobiography, Ghost in the Wires. I'm sure you've heard of Kevin Mitnick, one of the greatest phone freakers of his time. He wasn't the Captain Crunch guy, but he was
pretty close.
He was parallel. He was a peer of that guy. John, anyway, I can't remember his name, Captain Crunch. Anyway, Mitnick, reading this book or listening to it, however you want to say it, consuming this book, this is his own words, written alongside a co-writer. He just comes off as a total jerk. I'm not liking him. As the book goes on, I find myself rooting for him to be arrested and thrown in prison. I'm pretty sure that wasn't his intent as he was writing this. But I know this guy. I've never met Mitnick, but I know 1,000 like him. In his voice and in his mannerisms and in the things that he thinks are right and wrong. I can draw pictures of people just like him, and I can put his words in their mouths. And these were never people I liked. And so as I'm reading through this book, I'm more than 3/4 of the way through it now. I'm thinking, would the FBI please arrest this guy and send him to prison? I know he did. I know he spent a lot of time in prison. So through the history, I know it's coming. But instead of exonerating himself, which is what I think he's doing, no, he's making me want him to go to jail.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. Anybody who's read that book, did you have the same experience?
It's in my queue, so I'll be able to talk about it in probably 2 weeks when it comes through the queue for me.
And if you're not an Audible subscriber, elementopie.com/audible, you get a free book. I get a few bucks. It's a win-win. That's it. Okay, that's all our follow-up. So now let me tell you a little bit about the Linux Academy because they pay me to do that and because I like their product. There's the two reasons that I do their show. So you've heard me talk about them. I don't feel that I need to go forever, and Seth's not here to do a commercial after I do the commercial. So I'll just tell you the Linux Academy, their stated goal is to take you from being a Linux intermediate user, intermediate computer user, Linux novice, to a system certifiable system administrator. Certifiable doesn't sound right, but they do this by way of their step-by-step video courses. But it's way more than just courses. That's where it starts. You watch a video, but then that's not where they end you, like some other services that out there where the video is the beginning and the end. It's just the beginning for them. They've got the courses, the study guides, the lab system, which is just really super amazingly robust, where you can have up to 4 machines running simultaneously in Amazon's lightning fast cloud service in a safe environment where you can test stuff, where you can try to break stuff and not hurt anything. You don't have to log on to your boss's server late at night after hours just to see what'll happen. I've done that. You shouldn't. I shouldn't have. Bad things happened. You don't have to do that with Linux Academy. They provide you with all the tools. Courses expanding day by day. It's not just Linux. It's also Amazon. It's stuff for developers. Go check them out. LinuxAcademy.com. It's really high quality stuff, independently certified by third parties as being high quality. And they've been preparing people for new careers in Linux for a couple of years now successfully. And people are taking their courses, being ready for the certifications, taking the test, getting certified, getting new jobs, starting new lives because of the Linux Academy. It's $25 a month is the most that you'll ever pay. If you want to pay for 3 months up front, it's for a quarter, it's only $65. So you get a discount there. If you want to buy a year up front, it's $215 for a year, which breaks down to less than $18 a month. What I always recommend, pay the $25, a pizza or two, log in, check it out, spend a month really kicking the tires, right? Don't just look around and say, it wasn't worth $25. Start to learn, start to experience it. And at the end of that month, you're going to realize you've extracted so much value for that. You're going to want to go ahead and buy a bigger chunk of it. I can make that statement pretty confidently because so many people have. And also, if you go to linuxacademy.com/everydaylinux, you get a special price break, that a special deal that they've offered for us. So check them out, linuxacademy.com/everydaylinux. And now, on to the real reason we're here. Our good friend Chris is going to tell us about him, about you. And so I'll say this: Chris and I've mentioned it before. We've never shared the same air in a room. I've never met Chris face to face. I don't know what he actually looks like. I know what his camera renders him to look like. I don't know how tall he is. I don't know how much he weighs. I don't know, because I've only ever seen him from the waist up. I don't know if he ever wears pants. But I still,
that was a fun skit for a while too.
I still also consider him a friend because I've talked to him for hundreds of hours now. But I realize there are things about him I don't know and that you as a listener don't know. So we're going to get to know Chris a little bit. So first I want to start with Chris, the early years. Tell me about, just give me the bullet on where you grew up, what your interests were as a child. You mentioned being in education for a while and now you're not. So tell us the story of Chris in brief up till now.
Okay. So I guess we can be fairly brief with, typical childhood. Let's see. I'm the oldest of four, so there are three younger brothers, which I like to pick on as much. I still love to pick on them as much as I possibly can, even though two of them tower over me, both weight and height. So
the little big brother.
Yeah. I have two. Well, one is a little big brother, and the other one is just a little brother who's a little bit bigger than me, because he spends a whole lot more time at the gym because he doesn't have kids. But grew up. I always like to tell people when they ask me the question, well, what type of person were you in school? I was the person that was in everything, or could sit in with everybody. So I didn't have a social circle. I was a band geek, a choir geek, a drama geek. I did sports for a while. I was that person that did a little bit of everything. But all in all, I came down to computers. College time was in Phoenix, Arizona. Went to DeVry, bombed out of DeVry because that's a whole lot of stuff they want you to learn in a very, very short amount of time.
So would you discourage others from attempting to DeVry, or is it just not for you?
I would have been fine if I wouldn't have had to work and go to school. That was my biggest problem. I ended up having to do I don't remember what their class load was. It's changed now. It's not so steep. But it ended up being between class time out in lab time and homework. That was about 12 hours total time. And then I had to put as close to an 8-hour day in for work to pay for the apartment I was living in and, food. And then it just, after a while, the body needs sleep, and ran across my first case of insomnia that time period where, 7 days without sleep is dangerous. I recommend don't doing that.
All right.
Met my wife there. We moved up here. I'm now married to my lovely wife, Julia, who's not in the house, so it's the truth, and have 2 kids.
All right.
What else do you want to know? That was the 100,000-foot view.
So you washed out of DeVry. Did you complete your education?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I did not complete it. I am one of those guys who self-taught everything. I've torn machines down. I was growing up, I would tear computer stereos apart and look at the components and then try to put all the components back together and make something out of it. My mom she still tells me that anytime she sees me with a screwdriver, she's actually worried that I'm going to kill myself because I've been known to work on things with live power still in it.
Done that.
And I will definitely say 110 isn't bad. 220 kind of hurts. 440, don't play with it. It'll blow you out of your shoes.
Where I worked for a while, a guy, due to bad design of a test rig and carelessness on his part, both those things came together, got hit by 480 3-phase. And he was like 225 pounds, 6'2". It picked him up out of his chair and threw him across the room. Stuff
Yes.
not to be messed with.
Yeah. When I got hit by 440, I left my shoes on the ground. I was, tied into shoes like normal. I was working on at the time I was trying to change the pigtails out for a dryer, and I thought I had the outlet for a dryer, so it was 220, but I didn't know that the landlord had crossed the fuse box with the stove outlet. So even though I thought I had it turned off, I didn't. So I got 440. I was blowing it out of my shoes, thrown across the room. I didn't have hair on my arms for like a week because it smoked the hair right off my arms. I lost 3 teeth because of it. It cooked the centers of my teeth.
Wow.
So yeah, 440, don't play with.
Yeah. Just say no.
Just say no. Turn the breakers off. Yeah, that's, and I washed out of, like I said, I washed out of DeVry. I've tried to go back a couple of times to catch up on classes to see if I could do it online. Just not conducive with little kids, so I never made it back to get my degree.
So you got a job working for the local school district as their tech. Worked your way up a little bit there. Stayed there for how many years?
I was there 10 years.
10 years.
And the whole reason I got the job, this is a good story. So the whole reason I got the job is I went to that school, in high school, and that's the person that was doing the interview was the high school principal. So I originally interviewed for a janitor position, and when I walked in, he goes, "I have the computer position open too. Do you want me to put your name down for that?" And I go, "Yeah." I would much rather be a computer guy than a janitor. And so he knew me from when I was, like I said, when I was in high school, and I actually got in trouble and had to sign a piece of paper saying that I will not hack the school's computer network or change grades for anyone, no matter what, even if I need to look up my grades the previous year when I was a junior in high school. So he knew I knew my way around computers, and he was like, "Yeah, we'll just make you work for us and make sure all the little kids play nice."
Okay, so you worked at the school that you graduated from.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was a weird switch.
So have you ever lived anywhere other than this small town?
Well, I did live in Phoenix for the 2 years that I was down there.
Okay.
I've spent time in Australia. I've spent time, and then because of that time, I think it was 3 months down there. On the way back, I stopped over at a couple different places, but no, I really haven't lived anywhere but here.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm a hometown boy that never left, so to speak.
And
other
you
than to go to school.
You somehow found out about the Tightwad Tech podcast, became a regular listener there, became a
Yep.
contributor there in the chat room and sending emails. And then one day I said, "Hey, why don't you do this Linux show?" And that's how we met.
Well, actually, the first thing you did, yes, but yeah, that was basically when I started listening to is because the Fog show that you guys did on Fog, because I was looking for a replacement for Ghost, and I had to find something, and it had to be a like usual, it has to be a factor better, and I had to be able to prove it, and so your podcast gave me the ammunition to prove it, and then because of it, we switched to it, and then 3 years later, we moved to even the Microsoft certified thing. But yeah, it was because of the Fog broadcast. That's where I found out about you guys, and then you in general, and then it was fun because you guys are so new at it. It was fun to see if I could get you guys to choke on with the chat room,
which you're still doing on this show.
Yeah.
Still,
I still have fun.
Yeah, I hadn't honed my skills of ignoring the chat room at that point. So we brought you on for a listener feedback show, listener spotlight show.
Yep.
And then that's how we met. So that was 2011, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's where our paths crossed. And so from that point on, everything I ever learned about you was in the context of this show. So you have mentioned some of your things that you enjoy in the past, like D&D, like we just talked about that.
Yep.
I do know that you do martial arts. So that's interesting. You're a geek who's physical. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Tell me
Sure.
about your introduction into martial arts and what you've done with it. Now your whole family's in it, right?
Yeah, so the martial arts started early, like my high school when I was in high school. There was a system opening up. It was Karaho Kempo Karate, and I took that the entire time I was in high school, so 4 years. Um, it was kind of a weird system because you didn't progress through belt ranks, or at least the way my instructor did belt ranks was not the normal way of doing belt ranking that I ended up finding out after the fact. After 4 years, I was still considered a advanced white belt. So definitely something odd. But that whole thing started because a girl I liked said, "Hey, let's go check out this martial arts thing that just opened up."
All right.
So it was kind of a weird little coincidence that started me down this road of martial arts.
It says here in the notes you did that for 4 years, so through high school, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And
through
then
high school I did it, and then when I left for college, they didn't have a school in Phoenix, so I couldn't continue training down there. So I kind of fell out of it for a long time, and then my son was having problems with self-esteem and being bullied. And I was like, well, there's this Taekwondo class gym here in Glendive. Let's see if it'll help, because it can't hurt. The worst that it'll do is we find out that he can't do individual sports because he's not a very good team sports person either. So we started him down that road, and then my wife started shortly after that, and then I started up after they did. And I'm currently on the injured list because of my knee. So for those that don't know, my left knee has dislocated itself 4 different times. And that is probably the worst pain I've ever felt in my life each time.
And so is that something you need surgery for, or just stop doing that?
It's one of those things where the doctor doesn't quite understand why my knee is doing what it's doing. I do have a displaced tendon, which is what he's thinking is causing the majority of the problem. So far, the thought was just I could just strength train it out. I could strength train it back, and it would be okay. So far, that's not done anything other than make me angry because I want to be in Taekwondo or I want to do my martial arts, but I can't, because if I do any sort of a twist on that knee, I know it's gone. I'll be on the floor again. Especially after the last dislocation where all I was doing is walking down a dirt path and it went. So I'm currently on the soon to be surgery list where they're going to relocate that tendon and clean up. There's a growth on my knee that's been there since I was young called it's Schlager's or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but it's where as I grew the tendon, when it is attached to your knee or the shin bone, every time I started growing, the tendon would pull up a little bit, and so the bone would grow underneath. So I have this bump on my knee where the tendon's attached, and the tendon is split over that bump. So it's weak. So the thought is they're going to take the bump out and they're going to reconnect the tendon so it's one solid tendon, and that should fix up the problem, hopefully.
It sounds unpleasant in so many ways.
It does, but it's either that or risk walking up the stairs or walking down the stairs,
right,
and have it go. That's currently my biggest fear, because I could just see walking downstairs carrying a computer and have it dump out on me, and that just screams big problems all over the place. So, but yeah, I'm really hoping that once I get the surgery done and the healing done and the retraining my knee how to work properly, I'll be able to go back into it, because I was 3/4 of the way to my black belt in Taekwondo. I mean, I was 3 belts and I would have been there. So I would be in the cool club with my wife and my son, who are now soon to be 2nd degree black belts.
All right. So let's go back a little bit. You've mentioned the calligraphy, the pen thing, a couple of times, and you've mentioned the Taekwondo. What is the thing that you can't live without? Family aside, the thing that you You must do.
that I must do.
Yeah.
That would, that's my next bullet point. I am a notorious meditator. I meditate a lot. I actually have a really bad temper, and when I was younger, that's what helped me control my temper. And it's kind of one of those things that I latched onto it so tightly that now it's pretty much part of my daily routine. I'll take 15 seconds and just do a deep breathing exercise or something that, if I'm feeling wigged out or shaky or jittery or says, Mark, you've had these problems where somebody calls you up and it's just such a moronic, stupid, idiotic question. And you're just like, why are you even asking me this? So, those are moments where you can take that 13 milliseconds and just push it out and say, that's not my problem. It's not my energy. It's not my anything. And just let it go. That can be considered meditation. So, but I do it, 5-6 times a day. I'll just take a second. I'll pull myself away from my desk and look out the window and just let it go. Because otherwise I would be that angry geek who just doesn't know how to talk to people.
Nick, your company's computer guy. Move. So we're not talking sitting, knees crossed, fingertips touch, saying Om type of meditation.
Yeah, well, at home I am. That's what I do at home, because then I have, it's not, I guess you can call it a shrine, but it's not quite a shrine. It's a candle in a spot where I have it setting aside, and it's just my little spot to, when I need a couple of minutes, I go to that spot and light the candle. And that's because usually not most, but some meditation practices actually tell you to focus on something.
Right.
The word Om, that you see in the movies where their fingertips are on their knees and they're going Om. That's focusing on the breath and the movement of the air and the sound of that phrase. Other meditation types are, a light or the scent of a candle. There's lots of different ways to do it. The one that always worked best with me is a candle. So that's what I still do today.
And how did you get into that?
That reaches back to when I was younger, and I had like I said, I had a temper. Anger management was kind of one of those things that they always talked about. I never played well with others, so I would be the big bully, and sometimes, or I would be the passive aggressive bully type thing, and I would have to have a timeout, and they would send me away. And finally, one of my teachers said, here, take a look at this and see if this could help. When you get upset or angry, take a second and think of one of these things in this book. And he handed me a book, and I devoured the book, and it's been that way ever since.
Okay.
And that between meditation and reading, I couldn't live with either one. If I didn't have a book to read or a quiet place or it doesn't have to even be quiet, but a place for me to be away from everybody to recharge, I would probably implode.
So tell me about your reading habits. When do you read? What do you read? How often do you read?
Well, before this current shift in jobs, I would read every night. It'd be before my son was born, I would pick a book up and just kind of flip through it and read. After my son was born, when he was sitting in my lap, I would be reading a book out loud to him. So I was, that was always something that I did with him. It got to the point where he was starting to read the Tolkien books with me when he was in second grade. So I have a little bit of pride when I can say that my son started reading Tolkien when he was in second grade. But I read all the time. If it's anything like, how they say people have a hard time reading on a screen, the long form text on a blog post or whatever, doesn't bother me. I'll sit down and read an article, and just like I said about when you're talking about movies before, I'll read it once, and then I'll, with an open mind, and then I'll go back and reread the article and try and find points that I can either agree with or disagree with, or does the writer have clout in that in that whatever they're talking about. I kind of pick apart things after the fact, um, which leads to the next thought I had on the list, where I like to tinker. So, but I do that with books and movies. So I'm not the film connoisseur like you are, Mark, where you're looking at the cinematography or the sound score or anything else. But I look at it, does it follow a plot? Does it match the way it's been laid out? So I'll rewatch movies, and me and my little brother will tear them apart, and it's kind of fun to see. Or we'll pick out when they flub, like when the cigarette is burnt to a certain point, and
Right,
then the next
right.
scene it's full, and then that's fun.
Just last night, watching an episode of Daredevil, a character drains his whiskey glass, then they switch to another person, they come back and he's drinking the whiskey without having ever poured anything else. And I don't look for those things, but I see it. And my wife has learned that I have learned that I should never point them out to my wife. I used to say, look, he just did that. Now she's just I keep it to myself because it ruins it for her.
Right. That's why I have my little brother, because we'll sit down and, it's a movie that we've torn apart on our own, and then we'll sit down and watch it together. And my wife will be like, I can't even watch a movie with you two. So, yeah, it's fun.
So you have a driving need to understand how things work, is what you're saying.
I do. Even from a very, very young age, I would tear something apart just to try and figure it out. Then it's kind of grown into this new need where not only do I need to know how to figure it out and how it works, I need to make it work the ways that I want it to work.
So that was the thing I was going to ask. So has this need to understand, to disassemble and internalize, has that ever been turned around into now you're creating rather than disassembling? Is there a creative bent in you as well? And what are you creative? So,
well, when I was in school, it would have been, I would say yes with my music, because I was playing a saxophone for, well, let's see, I played sax for almost 8 years. So I would make music with, playing saxophone, which is a very similar to anything else where that you tear it apart, or you can, music is music. It doesn't change terribly much between one person to another. It's just how you understand it. So it was then that I was doing creation, but it was never large scale creation. It was only just the stuff I was working on. So I would be doing jazz music and do a jazz solo in the middle of something in the right key, and yeah, there's a lot of things there. But lately it's grown into the fact where I've gone, and this is kind of fed my need from my last job into the current job, where I want to know how the programs work or scripts work, or why does this thing do the thing that it's doing, and why is it not doing what I want it to do? And so now it's kind of blossomed into this new thing where I'm going to start learning how to program, because there's things I want, well, I guess, program in the novels that I want to write to hopefully maybe go down a new road.
So what kind of novel do you want to write?
I'm going to start probably in the fantasy realm, because I'm big into that with my D&D campaigns and all the other different, adventure, on the fly creation like that. It'd be something similar at least the first time, so I get my feet wet, and then I don't know. It's probably always be fiction. I'm not a very good fact writer, so it would probably always be fiction. Probably swords and spells, and maybe even some cyberpunk typey things. But that's where I'm currently looking at.
I know this may surprise some of our audience, but I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, I've never seen the game. I've never seen a board or pieces outside of television or movies. But from what I understand, there is a great deal of creative element among one particular person, which is the dungeon master who's writing the game and essentially telling the story. That is what I know from you from the show. That's something that you do. So you're essentially writing that as you go, right?
Right. Well, a lot of times, depending on the skill of the creator, the dungeon master or game master, you'll end up with a very straightforward movie-esque type, this happens, this happens, this happens, that happens, game over, end of that scene or that campaign. When I go down to find something for my players, or even if it's just for my kid, when we were doing little things, there's always choice, and you could force people into doing a certain thing, but it's better to make them choose the path you want them to go. But then you also have to be ready in case they do something off the wall, like in a dungeon. And we'll go down a Dungeons and Dragons realm for a minute. There's magical items that if they're broken, their magical energy is like an explosion. Well, there's things that can happen where stuff like that breaks on purpose or on accident, and then what happens to the world because of it. I've actually gotten to the point where I've designed a whole world or realm, so to speak, for my people to play in, instead of taking out of the box the cookie cutter adventure. They can play in a world that if they do something, it actually holds merit. And I keep a notebook with all of the things that have ever happened in that realm. And the next game will have all that stuff still happen. So it's basically, I've had this giant long run novel in my head with 50 different people that have been major characters. So it's a very on the fly type storytelling, is how I tell people I'm a storyteller. It's not a dungeon master. I'm telling a story. The players are just steering it.
So do you enjoy playing the game as much as you enjoy orchestrating the game?
Yes.
Which would you say you do more often?
Currently I'm doing more creation. The problem though is because I try to flush out and do as much what if thought thinking. It takes a long time for each session for me to play, so people get bored with waiting for me. So we have other people that are playing, but I have a lot of fun on either end, because on the game master side, I control the world and I can control how things happen and how they don't. But as the player, kind of like how I would hijack your guys' conversation in what text shows, I do the same thing as a player and throw off the wall things at the dungeon master that he now has to deal with because I said something totally weird and strange, and he never thought of it. And it makes the dungeon master that never thinks that way, they have to prepare for me, because I will, on a whim, derail a complete campaign just because I went, but I want to go over there. And over there, there's Dungeons and Dragons, and then, or there's, I like to go off the map where the sea creatures and the monsters live, just because I want to see what happens.
What I hear is you saying is that you enjoy destroying as much as you enjoy creating.
Yes. Challenging. I like to challenge people. Can I get away with saying that?
You can say whatever you want. It's your show. Is that something? So, are you still active in the D&D thing? Did it start at an early age and has it continued?
No, it actually, it didn't start at an early age. It probably would have, but it was one of those things that in my small town, it was kind of taboo. And then there's some personal things that happened, and I don't really want to go into them, but I never really played until I got to college, and then started playing with a couple guys in college. Came back to Glendive, and there's a couple of guys that I knew that played here, and I kept playing with them. And it just it was an outlet. It was an instant creativity outlet for me. And it was like, this is great.
Do you play online as well as in person?
I've tried playing online. It's just not the same, because there's no freedom of choices. You're constrained to the thinking of whoever created the game. So like if the current owners of the Dungeons and Dragons franchise is Wizards of the Coast, at least the last time I looked, they've put out a couple of game creation engines where you can create a game in their system, but it doesn't allow for very the wide variety of choices that can come up. Because if somebody in, let's say you're in a tavern, there's a billion things that can happen in there, and the game creation software doesn't allow for those monster amount of variables. You're pretty constrained to about 8 to 12 usually. And we've tried playing like over Skype even, or Google Hangouts. We haven't tried a Google Hangouts, but we've tried playing over Skype, and it loses something. And it's just maybe the fact that you can't just sit next to somebody and poke them and say, we need to do this. There's also eliminates the, like, there can be a secret system going on where the players can be conspiring against each other, but because say Johnny wants to steal Jake's magic item, well, he can't do it out in the open because then it's everybody knows. But he can hand the DM a note, and then, hey, there's something happening. He rolls to see if he can do it, and it happens. Now he has the magical item, and Jake doesn't, which can, that just gives you an idea of things you want that can be done that you just can't do in a computer setting. Which, if anybody is an RPG player that plays Skyrim or any of that other stuff, that stuff is kiddie pool compared to some of the things I've seen that a really good game master can do in a Dungeons and Dragons game.
But those are things you enjoy too, right? The online game play as well of role play games. What is your online game? You talk about Steam all the time. You built a whole computer for it. What do you play online when you play?
That's pretty much wide, as much choices there as I can possibly get. I have, there's some strategy games. There's some like what is that one? I can't remember the name of it now. It's Goo. What is that? The
World
physics
of Goo?
game. Yeah, where you're doing the physics.
Mm-hmm.
I have those type of games. I have tower defense games. I have first person shooters like Borderlands, and the zombie shooters like Left 4 Dead. And there's some adventure games. I'm all over the board when it comes to video games. I don't spend the time like I used to because obviously family and job and everything else. But it's all, I look at it as it's all fuel for my campaigns for the games. So when after I get done playing, like what was the last one I was playing that fed into one of the actual role playing games? There was one of the campaign or the challenges in one of the Borderlands games. I ended up doing something similar for it fed into my Dungeons and Dragons game that I had 2 weeks later, where they had a similar task. Obviously it wasn't with guns and shooting up of things, but the thought process was the same, where they had to do something with what was it? They had to free some people in a time limit because otherwise they're going to be sacrificed to a fire god, which in Borderlands is that's one of anybody who's played the new version, the Borderlands 2, that you get a pretty cool weapon at the end of that little mission. So it was very similar to what I had my people doing in the campaign, but it's also a normal trope in any fantasy realm where, go stop those people from being sacrificed. But it was, I described the campaign, the area that they were in, and I made it look like a Borderlands scene. And the couple of the players they finished the round, and we're done with the scene, and we're wrapping up for the night, and they go, "Did you pick that out of Borderlands?" And I go, "Well, a little bit." Because it was cool. Yeah. Well, it was the visuals of that part of the game were really cool. I really liked it. So it was like, well, I'm going to integrate that into what I'm going to do. And so I took something from somebody else, twisted it a little bit, and added my own spin, and then put it out for everyone else to see.
So you created a mod.
Basically. It was kind of a quick one, because they went down a path that I wasn't ready for. And so I, on the fly, went, okay, let's go.
What's your story with Linux? I mean, this is a show with Linux in the title, so we should talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Linux was one of those things that I did out of necessity, actually. I ended up with an old computer just after, let's see, just after I started with the school. I ended up with one of their old machines that I wanted to borrow, or that they could never get Windows to run on properly. And it just was blue screening, and no matter what we changed, no matter what we did, it couldn't work. And I was like, well, let me take it home and play with it for a couple of days over a weekend or something. Let me see if I can figure something else out. So, well, I guess that's the second story with Linux, but anyway, I'll finish that one. So I took it home and I put it was like Fedora 2 on it, and it worked out of the box. No problems, no screening, no crashing, no nothing. And so it was, which gave me a point to say that, well, obviously whatever the drivers are that are loading up into the Windows install are causing some sort of leak and crashing this machine, where the Linux machine isn't. The Linux isn't doing it. It doesn't have the leak. And I would dig through log files and trying to figure it out, and I proved it. And we ended up not using that model of machines at the school because of this weird crashy problem that was there. But my very first experience to Linux was, oh man, it was like 2000 ish, somewhere around there. And just after my son was born, I built a new rig, and I was playing with a program called Waste, and they said they had a Linux version of Waste, and I'm like, well, let me look at this Linux thing. So we went down to the Billings Borders and I bought a copy of SUSE Linux back in 2001 and installed it and went, wow, this is totally not what I'm ready for, and ran away from it because there's a lot of compiling that I had to do. And I'm like, man, this is outside of my comfort zone. But it sparked that desire to know how it worked. I wanted to know how this thing worked because I've had Windows figured out, and it was like, but why? Yeah, it was that why question that ran in my head, and I just couldn't get rid of it. And I've been there ever since. I've been, running it on just no matter what. There's at least one Linux machine in my house at all times.
Why? Why Linux?
Because I still don't understand it all the way. If I ever get to the point where I totally understand how the system is, maybe I'll be bored with it. But every time I think I get something, somebody changes, one of the fundamental blocks of how Linux machine boots. When we just went to System D, it's a totally different system. It works basically the same, and it functions basically the same as what we had previously, but it works a little different, and there's a little bit of differences here and there. So it's now learning the differences, and it changes something, and now it's all right. Now I got to dig through and figure out what that is now.
So that need to understand drives you to keep doing it.
It drives me to do just about everything. I am very much, when I get to the old, super long beard, white hair, I want to be that sage type person that when the world ends, they come to me and say, "Oh, wise one, how is this done?" And I can go, "Well, I did that back when I was 15, and blah, blah, blah." That's where I'll be when I'm, 90 or whatever, and I'm, old and senile. People want to lock me into a home.
What are your goals going for? So this is the story of Chris up to now. What is Chris going to be in 20 years? Before you get to the long white beard, what are your goals? Like, let's go professional first. What do you want to be when you grow up?
What do I want to be when I grow up? If you would have asked me this 7 months ago, before I started my new job, I would have said I want to be, I still had my home business. My original thought was I wanted to be a major computer repair shop player in the area that I'm in. I had made some pathways to make it happen, and I was thinking, to be able to say for the people in Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming to say if they need a computer problem fixed, they call the guys that reboot it. That's what I wanted. And that would have took 15 years to get to where I wanted it to be. And I had everything lined out and, spreadsheeted and graphed out, and I had everything perfectly laid out. But then the world changed on me, and things, you don't take it to your computer to a repair shop anymore. You just buy a new one.
Pretty much.
So that pretty much shot my long-term dream in the foot. And so I adjusted, and now I'm working for, I don't think I'll get in trouble for saying it, but I work for XTO Energy, which is the growth engine for ExxonMobil. We do all of the work for Exxon up here in the Bakken area. It would be really cool to stay with Exxon. They've surprisingly treated me better than I've ever been treated in any other job. I would love to be in senior IT management at this point, pulling the big strings to make the big decisions happen. But if that doesn't work, I'll twist and rotate again and I'll pivot and go another way. I'm not above changing direction. It's just I like to have a little more firm footing when I change. But if things get rocky, I'm not above, finding a way to do something different.
Are you happier being a general or a private?
That depends. I wouldn't mind being, I would like to be the general that is also the private. I don't have a problem giving direction, and I understand goal settings and everything else. But then there's times where I just want to put my head down and just trudge through the trenches and make things happen. Be the guy on the front line. But there's a part of me that desire to know forces me to say, but if I know the trenches, that's fine, but that doesn't tell me how the big guy thinks back in the big chair. So that desire to know pushes me back that way, to know that way too.
Do you think of yourself as a leader?
I think so. I don't have a problem leading, but I also don't see myself as a good leader at this point. Just for the simple fact that I don't think I've experienced enough to be a good leader. Leadership is one of those things it's grown, not born. A good leader should be one that has experienced enough things to be able to say, that is this thing. We need to not do that because it'll do this. The experience role should be there before the experience should be there before, or the life should be there before they move up to a management type role, because otherwise they haven't been in the trenches enough to know the back end.
So you don't want to be the lieutenant who's fresh out of college and sent to lead the platoon off. You want to be the grizzled old sergeant who's been in the field for 50 years.
Yeah. That's the idea of where I am. I'm old and crotchety already, so it's just going to get worse as I get older.
All right, as I end every interview, what have I left out? If you had one message that you wanted somebody to hear above anything else when they listen to this, if they only listen to the next 5 minutes, what do you want them to know about Chris?
To know about me, and I'm going to say to know about me, and to something to definitely learn. I am a very open person, and I love talking to people, and I love experiencing things, but know when to stop. So that also leads to my next point. Be a storyteller. Learn how to be a storyteller, because you never know when you have to be up in front of somebody or a group of people or even your kids and need to tell a story.
All right. Any action items? That was a bit of life advice. Learn to be a storyteller. What do you wish everybody listening to this would go do right now?
To go do right now?
Yeah, or to start the process of doing.
I would say I think everybody should experience a good D&D game.
Okay.
not a bad, and that could be the only way I can rationalize that is by saying, there are those D&D leaders, or the dungeon masters, that when you're done with the game, it's like after you watched a good movie. You're like, oh my God, where'd those 3 hours go of my life? Because I was I was sucked into the show. I have been in the realm of a good dungeon master where I didn't realize that almost 12 hours had passed, because the story was so engaging that it was just, it was like you were living a novel right there in your living room. It was like 8 to 12 hours that we gave that one time. Didn't even realize that it was, we started, it was lunchtime, and we finished, and it was like time for the bars to close. It was insane. It was crazy. Everybody should experience that at least once.
Awesome. All right. That's the end of the interview, unless you've got something that I neglected to ask you.
No, I think that covered everything.
That was fun. I now know more about Chris than I did. And like I said,
surprise you?
No, I don't think anything surprised me. The meditation thing was, unexpected, but it doesn't. No. It's not contrary to what I know of you. So surprising would be something that is outside of what I know of you. But yeah, everything you've said seems to be internally consistent.
Well, at least I'm consistent.
All right, so this is the part of the show where I tell you how you can ask questions about Chris, or about me, or about Linux, or about whatever you want to do, or just let us know what you think of Ultron or anything else. elementop.com, that's our home base. Back when I thought I was going to be doing lots of shows for the rest of my life, I needed a home base to put them all, and now I just do the one show. But anyway, elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the page. Let us know what you think. And by the way, if you are a web developer or know a web developer who's willing to work super cheap, like keg of beer cheap, I really want to move away from the crappy old website I built in 2010. But I don't have the skills. I don't have the time. So I want somebody who will help me redesign the Element OP website. But anyway, if you want to volunteer for that or anything else, elementop.com, click the Contact Us button. If you, like our anonymous caller today, want to have your voice on the air, by the way, mention your name when you call. You can do that. 559-IAM-OP is our Google Voice number, or you can just send me a file if you want. Nobody's taking me up on that. Well, I take it back. One person took me up on that and sent me like a 13-minute audio file. Don't do that. Keep it under 3 minutes. But I would, we love to hear from you. I hope you've enjoyed this departure from, there wasn't news. It was just all about, a man that I call a friend, and I hope you do too. My hope is that as you've listened to this show for, 191 episodes, you feel that we are your friends. I want you to feel that. I want you to think that. And so that I thought it would be good to get to know one of our friends. So let us know what you think. Thanks for being a listener, Chris. Thanks for being here. That was fun. Thank you for being so open and honest and opening the door to your life. But for now, I'm going to say that ends this episode of Everyday Linux.
See ya.
There it is. Hey, cool. YouTube viewers, see you later.
Toodles, guys. Have a good one.